This is the Farm Monitor. For over 50 years, your source for agribusiness news and features from around the Southeast and across the country, focusing on one of the nation's top industries, agriculture. The Farm Monitor is produced by one of the largest general farm organizations, the Georgia Farm Bureau. Now here are your hosts, Ray DeLesio and Kenny Bergamy.
All right, well, hi there. Welcome to our version of a farmhouse. Yeah, we need a few couches, maybe some lambs, a table or two, but we like it, and we definitely think you're going to like today's show.
Absolutely. It's a good one, that's for sure. Coming up, they're small, but man, can they inflict some damage. Talking about those pesky whiteflies. USDA is concerned about them, so much so, they're investing a huge chunk of change to study them. Also on the show, that trade agreement between the U.S. and Japan, well, it's a good one according to the American Farm Bureau. We'll tell you why they feel it's a positive step for agriculture and what it means for farmers right here in Georgia.
And then later, the Dogs and Balls celebrate Ag Day in Knoxville. And yeah, while the two schools may not be equals on the football field, they do share a number of similarities in terms of their commitment to agriculture. We'll have that story for you and so much more straight ahead on the Farm Monitor. Well, there is no denying that in recent years, rural America has suffered and will continue to do so if change doesn't happen. Well, fortunately, here in Georgia, something is being done, though, and that's the annual Georgia Chamber of Commerce Rural Prosperity Summit. John Holcomb reports.
When the term rural comes to mind, an image of a tractor often follows. Yes, tractors are often present in rural areas, but there's a lot more than just tractors in those places. There are small businesses, downtowns, schools, and everything else people have everywhere you go. The only big difference is that rural areas are suffering, and something needs to be done, which is what the Georgia Chamber of Commerce is hoping to do.
We started this 3 years ago to really bring attention to rural Georgia, to tell the story of rural Georgia, and to help connect communities on best practices, because obviously we know the decline that we're seeing across rural America. You know, Georgia's going to add 1.5 million people over the next 10 years, but at the same time, 74 of our rural counties are going to lose population.
One major topic addressed was the topic of health care. The main concern with health care, especially in rural Georgia, is actually being able to find a doctor.
Certainly, when you talk about rural health care in Georgia, you have to talk about accessibility. That's one of the things that we have to address, is making sure that we have health care professionals, particularly doctors, that are accessible to the people who live in rural Georgia. We've been working on this for many years. We've had some success attracting physicians to the rural areas. A lot of physicians want to go to the metro areas. They can generally make more money, they're busier, but for whatever reason. But nevertheless, we've got a lot to offer in rural Georgia, and we need to make that known.
One other big topic is education. 1 in 3 Georgia schools are considered rural, which means about 463,000 students go to a rural school. But sadly, Georgia is ranked in the bottom 10 states for a rural education.
There's many wonderful things about rural schools in Georgia, just like there are all across the country. They're small learning environments where people care about each other, and they're great places to be. But also in Georgia especially, student achievement is low. A lot of our students aren't prepared to go on and do something after high school, whether it be college, career training, agricultural careers, and that sort of thing.
When it really comes down to it, according to Richard, the issue is funding.
Rural is a big part of education in Georgia, and our view is that rural education in Georgia needs to be shored up. We don't invest anything close to the national average in spending per student on our rural kids.
In the end, there's one thing that stands out in rural America, and that's agriculture, and is something Clark says needs to always be present when having discussions on how to fix problems in rural areas.
I think a lot of times we're having these conversations around the country and we forget to talk about the real driver of rural economies, which is the farm life, right? Making sure we've got talent, making sure farmers have access to the technology that they want, that they have trade opportunities out there. And so being able to have farmers at the table, have agriculture at the table, everyone needs to be at the table to have these discussions. And I think it's vitally important that the ag community shows up, is engaged, and that the business community and local leaders ask them to the table and ask their input.
Reporting in Tifton for the Farm Monitor, I'm John Holcomb.
Meantime, various ag groups continue to applaud the newly signed trade agreement between the U.S. and Japan. When President Trump put ink to paper on October 7th, that immediately eliminated all tariffs on U.S. exports such as sweet corn, blueberries, poultry, and egg products, just to name a few. According to American Farm Bureau's Dave Salmonson, what the deal means for U.S. farmers and ranchers is more market access.
We already sell about $13 billion a year to Japan in a variety of products. We will be even with our competitors, and we should see good increases in our beef competitiveness into Japan. Pork tariffs are going to go down, have more access for dairy, and our wheat producers were concerned about falling behind our competitors. So the fact that we'll be in there again with the same tariff as other countries should shore up what has always been a very good market for wheat into Japan.
In 2017, whiteflies wiped out a majority of the squash and snap bean crop here in Georgia. Although it's not as much as an issue today, Damon Jones tells us why there's still a concern and what steps need to be taken in order to minimize the risk of infestation.
While small in size, these whiteflies are capable of big damage in cotton and vegetable crops around South Georgia, as they can transmit a number of different viruses to the plant. And even though the severity varies from year to year, they do remain a persistent issue for the growers.
Whitefly itself has been a problem for 2 decades now, somewhere in that range. We always have some problems with it in parts of the state, primarily Tift County, Colquitt County is where we have consistent problems with it. It's just a question of how bad it's going to be, how widespread it's going to be.
That's why the USDA has issued a more than $3 million grant to fund a joint project aimed at finding long-term solutions to the problem, as UGA, Fort Valley State, and the USDA Research Services will team up to study the issue from all different angles.
The goal for the overall project is really just trying to find better ways of managing whitefly and the viruses that it transmits. We've got a lot of different people working on a lot of different aspects of the issue, but that's really the overall goal is trying to find solutions that'll help growers produce crops.
As for what farmers can do in the meantime, with fall harvest right around the corner, identifying the problem early on, especially in areas more susceptible to the pests, is essential.
An individual female can lay in the range of 300 eggs in a very short time. They go through a life cycle in this kind of heat that we've been having in 2 weeks, maybe a little bit longer. So they can build up populations very rapidly. You can't wait and treat that kind of population. So in those situations, we're doing preventative treatments. You've got other areas in the state where we might be able to put out a squash plant and you might not see a whitefly for 2 or 3 weeks. Those areas, they're monitoring the populations and then responding as those populations build.
That preventative care is made even more necessary by the fact that most of the pesticides used to treat the problem have to be applied early on.
We pretty much have whiteflies, again, in Colquitt and Tift County every year, so we're putting out preventative treatments and then managing during the season as well. We have a lot of different chemistries, but most all of them work only on the nymph stages. They will not kill adults very well. So again, you can't let a population build up and then try to knock it down. You've got to be a little more preventative.
However, it is an issue growers are much more aware of now after these pests devastated a number of fall crops back in 2017.
We pay more attention to getting rid of crops when we're done with them so that we're not producing whiteflies when that season's over. There's a lot of cotton growers that in 2017 had never had whiteflies before. They realize the potential problem it can be, so they're attacking it much more rapidly than they would in the past.
Reporting from Tifton, I'm Damon Jones for the Farm Monitor.
All right, Damon, thanks so much. Grocery stores, local restaurants, farmers markets, you name it, they all come a-calling for Mary Rigdon's goat cheese products. After the break, why she feels all the credit should go to the goats.
All right, my name is Rick Minner. I'd like to welcome you here to the 23rd Annual Inman Farm Heritage Days. And as the name implies, it's an event that honors the farm heritage of our community here in Inman, which is in South Fayette County. We have, as you've seen, I guess, a lot of antique tractors, antique engines, old trucks. A lot of them tied to our community actually worked here back in the day. And we try really hard to have plenty of exhibits that sort of show farm life from an earlier time. We have a grist mill, syrup mill, even have a moonshine still. got a thrashing machine, hay balers, pea thrashing, just a lot of things. They even got an old log cabin that illustrates how life was in the log cabin days. My wife and daughter and I worked full time on this from about 4th of July on past the show. And we've always got something going on through the years, but we probably have 10 or 15 people that work like 5 or 6 days a week for a month leading up to this just to get ready for it. It just builds a spirit of community. And my favorite part of our event is not these 3 days that we're here with the public here. I really like that too, but I also enjoy getting together with folks from the community of Inman and the community of old iron collectors, and working on our stuff here and getting things running and restoring pieces that have fallen by the wayside. It's just a good way to share a common interest. Well, it sort of makes them understand more about what the role of agriculture today is, when they sort of understand where food comes from. Like a lot of people, particularly kids looking at ear corn, don't really realize how it affects their life today. It just sort of showed them the principles of agriculture, even if it's not the way we do things today. Because there's a lot of people here just don't understand about farming at all. They live in subdivisions, go to the grocery store, they don't get out and see what farming is really like. And this gives them, like I say, it's not modern agriculture, but it is agriculture, and the basics are here. So I think they can learn a lot from being here. And just anytime you get a chance to share the message of farming in a metro area, I think it's worthwhile. And we're really proud of what we do here. I mean, it'd be a success if you had this in South Georgia or out in the rural areas, but to do it here in a bedroom community, we're super proud of that.
Well, given its location exactly 9.7 miles due east of the world's busiest airport, plus the daily milking of 40 or so Saanen goats, one can certainly understand the sound obstacles we face for this next piece. However, it was all worth it, especially since we now get to bring you the story of Mary Rigdon, who owns and operates Decimal Place Farm. With great care and her attention to detail, Mary's goat cheese has been a smashing success at farmers markets and restaurants throughout Atlanta. According to Mary, her journey began while working as a USDA researcher studying not goats, but sheep.
Part of the reason why I started into this was for a small family that I could be a stay-at-home mom for my children, and we'd have the milk and the cheese and the vegetables from the garden. And because I had done the work with the sheep, I knew the fencing and the rotational grazing that was taught to me by a native New Zealander that I met through my research work. And I thought that that was a really great way to utilize the land again, because sustainability is more of what I was interested in. When I moved back from Oklahoma and Texas, Atlanta was a boom town for construction, and so I started working that way. And my girlfriends lived in Grant Park, so I found a place in Grant Park, and it was 1/10 of an acre, and I had vegetables all around the outside perimeter of the yard. And when I started looking into the dairy goats, you'd go to the meetings and folks would say, how many goats do you have and what's your farm name? And I finally just said, okay, it's Decimal Place Farm, and I'm marrying no goats at the moment. But I wanted to listen and hear other people's experiences with the goats because my research work had been with sheep.
And so what was once a mere 1/10 of an acre is now 40+ acres. Plenty of room for Mary's goats to graze and produce, resulting in what eventually becomes some of the best and healthiest cheeses on the market.
When I make these cheeses, it's the good bacteria, an organic vegetable rennet, and the goat milk. With the creamy goat cheese has no salt at all because I've got some folks that are heart patients, and the other cheeses that I make don't have as much salt as a commercially produced cheese. The other thing I don't use is a mold inhibitor, because I had some folks when I started that said that the mold inhibitor and some other cheeses had made them itch. And so the shelf life on my product is only 3 weeks. But the chefs in the Atlanta area and the folks that come to the Freedom Farmers Market on Saturday, that's at the Carter Center, have all been very supportive.
And make no mistake about it, Mary is equally as supportive and grateful for her business partners, the goats themselves.
The goats are more personable than the sheep that I was working with, but anything that utilizes poison ivy, privet, kudzu, honeysuckle, and is so efficient at that use is really important to me, because I had looked around Georgia and seen the different wild places that seem to be so grown up. And I thought that the goats would do a good job of clearing the land and utilizing it to the best. These Sonnens come from the Sonne Valley in Switzerland, and a breed characteristic is that they're always white with stand-up ears. The Nubian has a long floppy ear, and then there's another Alpine breed. So that I felt like this was calm and peaceful for my children. My daughter was 2.5 when we moved to the farm, and my son was born here. And the woman who had these goats here in Georgia was very knowledgeable. And I wanted to make sure and find someone who was a good mentor, because there's always that question that you haven't heard before that comes up, and Linda Pearson of Rock Point Farms did an excellent job of helping me through the various things that would happen with goats that you don't expect.
Well, up next, from goats to DAWGS, the Farm Monitor visits Knoxville for the annual UT Ag Day game, and this time it is against the beloved Bulldogs.
Agritech Analytics is a dairy records processing center that's part of the Dairy Herd Improvement Network within the United States. Our office is located in Visalia, California. You know, when people think California, they think about Hollywood, they think of the Bay Area. The reality is that 15% of the cows in the U.S. are located between Bakersfield and Sacramento in what's known here as the San Joaquin Valley. And most of those cows are within 20 miles one way or the other of Highway 99, which is 3 exits down from our doorstep here. So we're out there in the dairy industry every day. The core business is processing of the records. So we need to receive the input from the different DHI laboratories, field service providers, etc. We take all of that information in, turn it out into useful information for that producers can use to manage their dairy. And then on the backside, we're sending that information off to Council on Dairy Cattle Breeding, so it's incorporated into the U.S. genetic evaluations. We also send records directly to the Breed Association for inclusion and pedigree. So there's a lot of different things that go on with the data. And basically, our role here is to try to provide information so that a producer can better manage his dairy herd.
Our cow records have ran through Agritech for about 40 years. We test every month for milk weights, components, and somatic cell count. The testing process is pretty simple. Basically, at the same time every month, the testers come out and install the meters in the barn before they start milking. The samples are ran through the DHI lab overnight, and by midday the next day, Agritech's already processed our herd and it's ready to download back in to the Dairy Comp 305 here on the dairy.
Production data is important to the industry for a number of reasons. I think the very first thing, if we look at it on the farm level, pounds of milk produced is directly related to income. That's important so that our clients continue to exist and stay in business. From a bigger scale, though, I think as we look at what we're really all about is trying to have efficient milk production. The high-producing cow has the lowest carbon footprint per unit of dairy product provided. In other words, a pound of cheese from a 30,000 pound milk production cow is going to have a lower carbon footprint than one at 15,000. And it's basically tied into maintenance requirements of the animal. So we're trying to do our part to keep our clients in business and keep things as sustainable and environmentally friendly as we possibly can. When I was 10 years old, I was the person sketching calves for the registration papers that would go to Holstein Association USA, which is kind of interesting that now that I'm working for that organization, is heading up their division. So it's not a job, okay? It's what I do, okay? It's part of me, all right? I mean, I don't wake up in the morning and think, oh man, I gotta go to work. It's like my mind's already rolling as to, you know, what are those next topics we're talking about and all that kind of stuff. The key is that we've got all the oars in the water pulling the same way, and it takes a team to get it done.
On a monthly basis, I get the emails come from Meg to let me know like what reports are ready, and Teresa is the one that processes our herd virtually every month, and so I'll get the message from her the day after test day that the download's ready to receive. So yeah, we have a good working relationship.
The herd review gives us an opportunity to compare the data from the last test to the current test. So I'm going to release this, and now it's going to form reports. To obtain the data from the website, Those reports are available to them within just a few moments after processing.
It varies from day to day how many animals that I'm working with, but for the most part, I would say we'd process about 30-40 herds a day, and so over the course of a month, it could be 500,000 cows.
We believe that the benefits of processing at Agritech outweigh what it costs. We feel like we get a value for what we pay there. Having our monthly data from Agritech has helped us pick and choose what avenues we take to be the best stewards of what we have here.
Finally this week, this is part of the show where we normally bring in longtime contributor Charles Denny, who from time to time provides us with special features on Tennessee agriculture.
Yeah, but for once, we are going to him. You see, back in the summer, Charles hit me up on the phone and said, "Hey, Ray, why don't you come up for the Vols annual Ag Day game against Georgia?" Figured, why not? Take in some football, celebrate the ag industry. Just 2 rules, said Charles. Got to leave the UGA gear at home, and you can't yell, "Go Dogs," every 5 minutes. Well, Charles, here we are, Ag Day weekend. We got Neyland Stadium in the background. We got the Vols, the Dogs. Could you really ask for 2 better schools for an Ag Day game? Both schools so close in proximity, and 2 schools that really take a lot of pride in their agricultural programs.
Yeah, absolutely. Perfect Ag Day game. Welcome to Rocky Top.
Thank you. Good to be here. Good to be here.
It is. It's perfect. You know, Georgia and Tennessee, a lot of similarities between those 2 great land-grant universities with ag research and extension throughout. You know, and with Georgia is much like Tennessee, great diversity statewide. Right. You know, Rome and Dalton's very different from Valdosta and Savannah. You know, and you see it throughout the state. You know, there's the, what we grow in one part of the Georgia is different from another, and Tennessee is much the same way. And this really Ag Day is just kind of a celebration of agriculture.
Well, I tell you what, you're awfully brave wearing that shirt on this campus today. But I guess what they say, you know, once a Bulldog, always a Bulldog, huh?
That's right, and we wear our colors proud and make a difference where we go. You know, as I travel the country and go to these universities, they're so proud of their agricultural schools. And, you know, these agricultural schools are turning out tremendous young people that are trying to make their way back to the farm or with a supporting company of the farms. And if it wasn't for these schools, we wouldn't have the level of cutting-edge level of research. We wouldn't have the products that are brought to us by the people that work for those companies. But we depend so much on them to be able to keep American agriculture on that leading edge.
Thank you all very much, and we are delighted to be here. It's a wonderful university, and you've got every right to be proud.
You know, a great rivalry between 2 states that have great agricultural industries, and I think what better way to celebrate that than to have a get-together like this. You know, our goal is to remind folks about the importance of agriculture, to remind them that the university cares about them, especially our alums, as well as our stakeholders. We are interested in providing real-life solutions, and this is a chance, again, for us to reconnect, determine what solutions are needed, what solutions have worked in the past, what we can do to improve quality of life in our rural communities as well as our urban areas.
Great time, and of course, Dogs won big, 43-14. Great to see Charles, though, as well as President Duvall. And of course, a huge thank you to UT for having us up there.
Yeah, ditto what Ray said there. Thank you for watching the Farm Monitor. We'll see you next week.
Be safe.